Hi, and welcome back to Les's Lab. In this episode we're going to use the homemade Raspberry Pi Spectrometer to measure the tuning curves of several laser dies in my homemade die laser. So let's go. So if you've been following my videos on YouTube, you'll know that I'm into electronics, lasers, optics, all that kind of stuff. I've got a collection of stuff on the bench here. On the right hand side I've got the Raspberry Pi Spectrometer that I built and released a video for a few weeks ago. At the back I've got a die laser. This is a homemade die laser that's actually tunable. At the back here I've got a fiber launcher for the MNL 100 nitrogen laser that I did a teardown on some time ago because I'm going to use that today. And then I've got a lineup of fluorescent dies. Whole purpose of this video is can we take some spectra of the die laser emission spectra of these dies using the Raspberry Pi Spectrometer. I've got a UV light just off of the camera here, and if I turn it on we can see the dies fluorescing. If I go from left to right, we've got Coumarin 1 which emits from somewhere in the blue to somewhere in the green. We have sodium fluorescein, and we've got Rhodamine 6G, and then finally Rhodamine B on the end. These don't look very bright because I've got the room light on. I'll just go and switch the light off and we can take a look at the fluorescence. So as you can see, these four dies are fluorescing really quite brilliantly. Even the Rhodamine B is quite emissive in the red. Now that we have all this stuff together, we need some sensible way of mounting these things. Before, when I've been working with optics, everything's just been perched on little lumps of aluminium. You'll notice on these mounts here, this is the fiber launcher for the MNL 100 nitrogen laser. So I built a little mount for it with M6 cap head bolts. And I've also torn down the die laser and added M6 cap head bolts to it as well, because I've been shopping at Thor Labs again. So let's take a look and see what I bought there. So this is my latest purchase from Thor Labs. Once again, I'm not affiliated with these guys. This isn't a paid promotion. I just thought it was high time that I purchased an optical breadboard to do serious work on, so that I can bolt things down. I can tune the die laser without it moving. This cost about 200 bucks, including tax and shipping. And I can honestly say it is well worth the money. I did consider buying a piece of, a big thick piece of aluminium and drilling all of the holes in it and tapping them and getting the thing anodized, but honestly, by the time I'd done all that, it probably cost me more than it was sold to me for. So a really, really excellent buy. Everything goes together so easily on this. So let's assemble it. So now we have our setup here. We've got the die laser set up and we've got the fiber launcher set up, and we're successfully pumping the die laser. So we need a couple more bits and pieces. I'm going to remove the collimation lens from the front of the die laser because I want to expand the beam out as much as possible. So I'll just let it do it by itself. I also need mirror mounts for this. Now for this I haven't bought mirror mounts from Thor Labs. I keep finding these things really, really cheap online. So here's a mirror mount I've picked up, and I've just mounted a telescope diagonal on it. So once again, I've modified these, added little bases on so that we can mount the mirrors effectively. So now we have our beam on a piece of paper. Problem with paper is, if you've watched a previous episode where I talked about ultraviolet light and fluorescence, paper is actually fluorescent, so it's probably not the best target to use. So what I'm going to use is this stuff. I'm going to use, it's an experiment and we'll soon see if it works. It's PTFE thread sealing tape. It's Teflon. Teflon's actually highly broadband reflective across the entire spectrum. In fact, you can buy a laser target called Spectralon, which is specifically designed to be a highly reflective target You know, it reflects something like 99.9 odd % of the available light. But so this is poor man's Spectralon. So I'll just turn the laser off, and we'll wrap this stuff around our target. So all I'm doing is just wrapping the PTFE tape around the mount, and I'll do a few layers to make sure that we're not really losing light. Not that that's much of a problem with several kilowatts of laser light, but might as well have a nice clean job to look at. I think that should do. So now we have everything set up, I'll tune back down to the violet or blue or wherever it is, and then we'll fire up the software and see what it sees. So we have our dye laser set up here. I've got Coumarin 1 as the lasant. I've got my poor man's Spectralon target, and I've got my spectroscope set up. In the software we can see a little peak. I'll hit peak hold because, as we can see in the preview window there, this is flickering. The laser is actually pulsed. It runs at 20 Hertz and the camera runs at 24, and the two are sort of beating with each other. But once we've hit peak hold, we can see we've got little peak at 464 nanometers. So we'll begin tuning the dye laser, and we can see that very rapidly the output increases as we sweep through its tuning range. We'll just keep going nice and slowly. At some point in the future I'm going to set this up with a stepper motor to drive the mirror, so that I don't have to do this manually. You can just leave the experiment to run. But I think that's about the limit of our tuning curve there. I'll just sweep back, see if we've missed any bits. Awesome. So for Coumarin 1 we've got 460 nanometers all the way up to about 520, so that's the limit of our tuning curve there. So we'll fire in the next dye. We'll go for Fluorescein. So there's our output from sodium fluorescein, and we can see we've already got our curve started to be painted there. There's the tuning limit for Fluorescein. So we can see the tuning range for the Coumarin dye is really very wide. The tuning range for Fluorescein is really quite narrow. So we're going from about 560 nanometers all the way up to 590 or thereabouts. So mostly yellow. I'll disable peak hold and we'll take a look at Rhodamine 6G. The reason I've just cleared the screen there is because Rhodamine 6G's tuning curve overlaps that of Fluorescein quite significantly. So we'll start tuning back. We can see that the output from Rhodamine 6G is quite a bit higher as well. The tuning range seems a little wider. Awesome. So we've got about 560 to 595, I would say, so ever so slightly wider. With Rhodamine 6G, the light output's considerably brighter than Fluorescein. Fluorescein tends not to be used in dye lasers too much. From an amateur perspective, I suppose use Fluorescein because it's cheap and easy to get hold of and it's non-toxic. Rhodamine 6G on the other hand is carcinogenic. It's not something you want to be touching. We'll go and get Rhodamine B. I might have to rotate that cuvette. That's better. Yeah, incidentally, you'll have just seen I rotated the cuvette there when I had no output. Cuvettes have a good side and a bad side. I should label them actually, but it's fine. So Rhodamine B lasers in the red, and we can see our curve being painted on the graph there. That's better. I should probably add bolts to the spectroscope. I suspect it moves ever so slightly. It shouldn't affect the measurement too much, but it's not helpful when it loses sight of the output. So let's carry on tuning our Rhodamine B. Got quite a large tuning range for this die. I think that's all that there is to it. So what we've got, 600, 610, 612, about 625 all the way up to 50, 60, yeah, about 660, 670, yeah, about 670. Yeah, so there's our tuning curve for Rhodamine B. I'll just go and grab our Coumarin die again. And we'll just tune back the way, just so that we have all three on the screen at once. Excellent. I'll just nudge this spectroscope. There's our tuning limit. We'll just tune back. Great stuff. Let's fix the labels here. Oops. Awesome. So we've got our three tuning ranges on the screen there. So we can clearly see our Coumarin tuning range, our Rhodamine 6G tuning range, and the tuning range for Rhodamine B. Absolutely fantastic. We can't filter in this because filters disable when peak hold is on. But yeah, it's an odd peak at 372 down there. I don't know what that's all about. Awesome. I'll take a snapshot of that. So I'll hit snapshot. There we go. So now we should have all of this stuff in a file. Let's open that up with Office. Let's go and find it. We want the last CSV, so that would be 1512 and 31 seconds. Let's open it up with LibreOffice Calc. We'll just stop the laser while we're waiting. There we go. So we'll just select our two columns and we'll insert a chart and see what this looks like. Awesome. So there's our three tuning curves. There's Coumarin 1, Rhodamine 6G, Rhodamine B. We can do whatever we wanted with this data, I guess. You know, we've got a real clear indication of where the tuning curves take off and where they descend in each three cases. I suppose the thing to do now would be to go out and find dyes that fill in these gaps in these spectra here, which would be, you know, particularly nice. So we want a dye that's going to lay somewhere between about 510 nanometers, I suppose, all the way up to about 580. We'll probably find that there's several dyes it would take. You know, there's a lot of these tuning ranges are quite narrow, so it'll probably take about 2 laser dyes to plug that gap and another 2 to plug this gap. It's also interesting to note there's quite a few dyes that will laser in the infrared, So I think we can go about, it go as deep as maybe 800 nanometers or so. Not many will laze particularly well in the ultraviolet. I think we'd be lucky if we got too far down past 400 nanometers, but it would be pretty neat to see all that stuff in any case. Thanks for watching this episode of Les's Lab. If you want to see more content like this, don't forget to hit like and subscribe down below, and I'll see you guys next time.